Okay, everybody, welcome back. Got a really great panel for you this afternoon. And we're going to give each of them a, how long, Andrea? 20 seconds. 20 seconds? No. At least a minute and a half to introduce yourselves, company, and a little snippet about what you guys do. Nate, we'll start on your end.
Nate Herman. I'm the Senior Vice President for Supply Chain at the American Apparel and Footwear Association, which is the main industry association for the apparel and footwear industry in the United States. We cover a number of issues, including supply chain issues, and that's why I'm here. Under supply chain, we cover sustainability, social responsibility, transportation, logistics, labeling, customs, everything that's involved in getting the product from there to here in a safe and responsible manner.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Schreiber. I'm the Executive Director and founder of FabScrap. FabScrap is a 3-year-old nonprofit based in New York City. We work with about 400 fashion and interior design companies now to recover all of their excess and unwanted fabrics from the design process and a little bit from production happening in the city. So we're a service for companies. We're also a resource. We anonymously redistribute all of that fabric to students and artists and crafters, emerging designers. And we do a lot of that with volunteer help. So we're also a community of people engaged in sustainability at a grassroots way.
And hi everyone, I'm Andrea Kennedy. I teach at LIM College. I'm excited to be part of a new minor called the Sustainability Minor, and we teach students all about how to be sustainable thinkers and how to get sustainability across your supply chain and make action plans and how to source sustainably. I'm also the founder of FashionDex.com, where we help brands, designers, manufacturers, find sources and factories, and our focus in the last 15 years have been doing that in a more sustainable and responsible and transparent way.
Hi, I'm Amara. I'm the founder and CEO of Amara, which is a high-end women's clothing shirt line. Our interest in sustainability has really come from the fact that we are almost the opposite of fast fashion, both from a production perspective and from a stylistic perspective. We produce shirts that are meant to endure in your wardrobe for seasons to come. I don't know how many of you know this, but 3/5 of the clothing produced ends up in landfills or incinerators within a year of being produced. And when you hear about that stat, maybe it doesn't mean that much, but just to give some context to that, every second, the equivalent of a garbage truck worth of clothing goes into an incinerator or landfill. So it's really, I feel like at this point there's an urgency to really think about how we are driving the fashion cycles, how fast they are, and how much waste is coming out of our industry. So that's kind of my angle and interest in sustainability.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Benedetto. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Queen of Raw. My family has been in fashion and textiles in New York for over 100 years. So I grew up around this industry, love it, obviously, but dislike all the waste it produces. And I just figured there had to be a better way, and my passion and my vision with Queen of Raw is how can we use technology and build business models that make sense for people, for planet, but also for a business's profit. So Queen of Raw is a global marketplace for businesses small to the largest brands and retailers in the world to buy and sell their unused textiles from 1 yard to 1 million yards. Keep it out of landfill and help them turn that pollution into profit. And we've also built some tools into the marketplace that help these businesses identify waste in real time in their chains and intelligently minimize waste going forward.
So my name is Alex Penades. I'm the North America manager for Gino Loggia. Gino Loggia started 25 years ago as a denim consultancy company, but then about 5 years after that, we decided to create technology that would really change the entire industry. You are probably familiar with lasers that apply to finishing garments, and we also deliver other eco technologies that save up water. Mainly our objective is to get water out of the equation of a laundry or finishing denim and other garments as well. And we are actually present in most of the mills and garment producers around the world.
Thank you very much. Excellent. 1 minute and 14 seconds. Actually, 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Everybody got under their time. So we're going to start with a couple questions, and we're going to do the first question. I'm going to ask everyone on the panel to chime in, and then we'll skip around and see where this goes. So, what are we doing now that is not working, and why? Anybody want to be the first person to take that?
Sure, I'll take it.
Okay, Nate.
So the industry is focused mainly on 3 main areas, and the companies and the organizations represented here really cover all those main areas. It's reduce, reuse, or recycle is pretty much the approach of the industry. The industry has spent most of the time, however, focusing on the recycle part of it. How can we use more recycled materials in what we're making, and how can we start recycling programs for post-consumer waste and have people bring stuff back in the stores or other means to do that. And the issue with that is that's great from a marketing angle, but there's problems with both of those. Recycled materials, it's very hard to have certain products made with recycled materials. The recycled materials are harder to get, and everybody talks about the China trade war. One of the first things China did as part of that trade war was ban all waste coming into the country, including textile waste and PET bottles, which are 2 main sources of recycled fiber for the industry. And so that drove up costs, created supply problems, and other issues. And then recycling, as others will probably talk about, only maybe 1/3 of the product that's recycled actually turns back into clothing or is reused in other ways. Otherwise, it's either sold as used clothing overseas somewhere by the ton in developing countries, or it ends up in the incinerator or the dump. And so the issue is we really need to focus more on reuse or reduce, and people will be able to talk here about those. The issue is that those are not as sexy or as easy to explain to the consumer from a marketing perspective.
Thank you, Nate. Jess?
Just for context, my background is waste management, not the fashion industry, so everything that I'm saying is coming from end of life, and what I'm noticing as we get waste fabric and excess fabric. One thing that we see most often is thousands and thousands and thousands of fabric headers, fabric swatches from mills. I think it would be really great if there was a take-back program there, where there was more communication between mills and the designers using their swatches. We also have a lot of brands who send us mutilated and mock-up garments. For whatever reason, I think there's some competitive buying, there's some tariff reasons why garments wholly usable with some repair are being thrown away. In terms of recycling, I will say most of what I'm seeing is actually downcycling. Fibers are being turned into something less useful or completely different. So even in our case, we're shredding small pieces that can't be reused into insulation or carpet padding or mattress stuffing, but not really back into another fiber. And so that fiber-to-fiber technology is just not quite there yet. I also just think at the beginning of a product's life, there could be more intention and more thought to its end of life. For example, we can shred almost everything except for spandex. And as athleisure becomes more popular, we're seeing a lot of fabrics that have spandex content. And I'm not sure designers know that that material can't be recycled end of life. So even just that education at the beginning through to what happens when that item is done, it would be really helpful.
Jessica, you make a great point about those head ends. Working for Ulster weavers, designers or the merchandisers would come in and they'd pick 45, 50, 60, knowing they're going to settle on maybe one, if that, if you got the order. So, and then, you know, they take them, and what would happen to them?
They come to us.
Yeah, okay. Andrea? We'll just go down the road here. It looks most sense, yeah.
But I agree, a lot of decisions are made, well, 70% of a garment's impacts are decided during the development and design stage. But I agree that so many decisions are short-term and responsive, and we have to start creating garments that will have longevity in them, as well as really looking at long-term goals, as opposed to everything all short-term decisions, and making those in terms of really creating long-term goals in terms of energy efficiency. So what is not working is I don't think we're really thinking of the climate situation, for instance, at fashion brands, and I think that we should, because we're contributing to the crisis that is occurring right now. So just long-term climate goals and how you can slowly reduce your energy efficiency, your waste impacts, your water efficiency, and your pollution year to year, and make your decisions in sourcing and around supply chain to meet those reduced goals.
So I think I agree with Nate's point about the reusing. I think that, from my personal standpoint, that's definitely something that we have really built into our brand. But at the same time, fast fashion does bring a very tangible value from a cost perspective and from the perspective of, how quickly they freshen their collection. So I feel like it's something that we really need to sort of get to the core of, because you can't really just say, you can't really just deny the importance of that or the value of that, and that problem needs to be solved to really bring reuse as like a meaningful discussion.
It's funny to be on a sustainability panel and say this, but I think one of the things that is not working is that very word, right? Sustainability. I mean, it means so many things to so many people, and at the end of the day, we really need it to be just the way good business is done. So I'm really passionate about understanding not just business models that can help with sustainability and long-term benefits, but may cost you a lot more now, but how can we find business models that actually don't cost you more? In fact, they may make you money now, but still have sustainability in mind and give you those short-term successes. I mean, that's what we're passionate about in our platform is, can we give businesses a way to monetize their waste immediately, minimize their waste in the long term, and actually help. We've increased the bottom lines by 15%, increased their top lines with a sustainable story to tell, and you get to save, in the past few months we saved over 1 billion gallons of water. So I think there are models that can be short-term successes as well as the longer-term visions that these brands and retailers have to go 100% zero waste or circular, which is great. And a short little thing that I think is not working, but it's something we deal with a lot, is sampling. I understand in this industry the value of touching things. It is very important. But how much information you can get from a little square that gets shipped all over the world, and you're going to get thousands of them a day, and it's not cut from the same lot that your production run actually comes from, so there are discrepancies anyway. Well, the beauty of dead stock is it gets rid of all that. You can sample by having a few yards, which is more meaningful anyway, test that product, and then you can buy from the entire lot that your production run is actually coming from. So it gets rid of a lot of those problems, plus has a sustainable benefit.
Well, I couldn't say more than you guys said, especially you. You said many things, so which is that are relevant. So, and I couldn't explain them better than you guys. But what I really think we're missing is the engagement from the top management, from the CEOs to the presidents to any supply chain ESVPs, and from our experience, what we see is that once there is an engagement from them or by them, then things work out better. That you might just translate it into get in their bonuses a variable that is sustainability. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And it's sad to say it, but I've been here telling this story for a long time, and money is the change driver always, being from the saving perspective or being from the motivating perspective.
Alex, you hit on a really important part. I want to stay on this question for a minute or two. Two things in my mind: culture and money. So how do you change the culture of the industry, and how do you make it, as Stephanie said, monetize it so that there is a reason for someone to do it?
The obvious benefit of sustainability versus something like social responsibility, from convincing the CEO level or the C-suite to buy into it is that there is return on investment in most cases. And it depends, short-term and long-term. Sometimes you have to make a huge investment up front, but you can still show over a 5, 6, 7, 10-year period that you're going to get your money back and more if you make that investment, where that's very difficult to show when you're talking about labor rights and improving worker productivity and things like that. It's harder to measure. And so you have easy ways to measure the results. If you're using dead stock, then you're obviously not creating new product that's going into the landfills and the incinerators, and it's probably cheaper than what the original stuff would have been anyway, and so there's a lot of benefits that you can show. And so that's the real strong point of sustainability. If you choose one area that you're going to focus on, reducing water, changing your sampling processes, or whatever, you don't have to go after everything all at once, but if you choose one or two things, and it can be very discrete, and you can show the return on investment, or in some cases you don't even have to make the investment, then I think then you can start building the case for doing bigger things down the road.
And I do think you can measure social action at the factory. You can measure how many workers in the factory have health care this year compared to last and whatnot. And I think that in terms of money, sometimes you do have to tell a factory that yourself and a few other brands will get together and help you put this in. But if you don't make these changes within a year, we're not going to work here anymore. And that is a monetary reward. We will still give you the order if you make these changes. We won't, and we'll pull out if you don't. And sometimes, as much as you don't want to work that way, that has worked with some of the brands that we've worked with at Fashion Dex.
I might just say that that's measurement is basic, all this conversation. We have a software that precisely measures the impact, whether if we're talking about labor conditions, energy consumption, water consumption, and chemicals, okay? So those four are the ones that we measure, and we invite our customers to measure and the brands to measure their impact. So, but the thing is that this industry has been so much inefficient historically, and we've done crazy stuff that even by doing a small tweak into what we're doing, the efficiencies are going to come and the savings are going to be here. I mean, we're talking about not returns on investments of 10, 15 years. We're talking about returns on investment of months, not even 2 years. So, and that's because we, we just done so many bad stuff that it's easy to improve easily and fast.
But the culture is already shifting to in a good way. I mean, we're seeing how much is it thriving, the Real and ThreadUp and Poshmark, right? And whether you're going to them because of its sustainability value prop, or you're going because you're getting something amazing at a steep discount, it's booming and it's here. And the fact that businesses like Macy's are now partnering with ThreadUp and selling these kinds of goods, I think those are really exciting business models, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg of where this can go.
And just to jump on that, I think long term, if we want to talk about money and we want to talk about culture, if we're looking like further down the line about creative solutions and something that's really exciting, I think to see bigger brands sort of take on the certified pre-owned model, like why sell the clothing just once if you could take it back and sell it again and then you have that profit 2 times? Particularly in the luxury segment, if you're making a really quality product that lasts a while, why have Real sell it and not bring that in-house? And so I think that's something that's a creative, bigger change to the business model that can be really exciting for people, create extra revenue, and it sort of also will show you like where products are coming back and where they're failing and why.
Great points. Amara?
I agree. I think that, one of the things that also is really important is how the end user is going to behave as we move forward. So I think that's going to be a big part of, how they're going to use the product. And I think if we can, while we can change our business models, if we can sort of affect the culture to really teach the end user about this, I think that's really going to make a huge difference.
The industry's pretty much bifurcated, though. You mentioned a couple companies that are relatively new, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. new culture. They're looking at businesses a different way. Then you have everybody else who is driven by return on investment, stockholders, publicly traded companies. Those are the ones, I think, that need the cultural change. Those are the big ones who need to do that. And with Macy's bringing in ThredUp and other companies like that, maybe it's the slight beginning. But any thoughts there? Again, because you've got really it's large companies that are publicly traded, that are being driven by Wall Street for the return on investment tomorrow, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, tomorrow, versus all of these other companies that are coming out with new business models that are changing the industry.
But that absolutely makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, they're a business and they need to show their ROI to their investors, right? And their C-suites, of course. So maybe some of the advantages in this conversation is when we go in and we talk to enterprise, we don't necessarily pitch this as a sustainable solution. And we don't necessarily only talk to the sustainability team. You need to have the CFO and the financial team there to understand how this impacts and improves their liability on their books or their top-end revenue. You need to have supply chain and procurement in there to show how this simplifies some of their jobs and reduces their inefficiencies with whatever technology solution by 98.5%. Like those, having all those people in a room and those conversations, you're driving the business, and then pat yourself on the back, you've also got a sustainable benefit.
Anybody else on that
Yeah,
one?
I mean, and this is also where you start small. You don't, not everybody can be the Eileen Fishers of the world. And especially when you are a public company and you have other pressures. So you pick something small. And you pick one or two things. You don't go for the whole gambit. Sustainability can mean a million things to a million different people. So you choose, you want to reduce water in the factories, in your supply chain, especially if you're doing something like denim. You want to do something with sampling. You want to do something with, you're getting all these returns in your stores. What do you do with them? You can reuse them. You can make them a little different and resell them as a different product. You can fix that button, change the zipper, or whatever is broken, and start, so that's not going into a landfill. You can pick little things to start, and then that's where you start showing the C-suite that this is possible. You do get a return. You get a return pretty quickly in many cases. Why not do more?
Or you could choose to go big, and I know some businesses have literally downloaded Kering's sustainability report and delivered it to their C-suites and show, look, they went big, they have adopted sustainability at all these stages, and look how much money they've saved. We can do this too. And it's kind of a blueprint. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's a great outline of blueprint for how to do this in a major, obviously, corporation. Kering's report, if you go to Kering, Kering.com, they own Gucci, Puma, and all these brands, big in sustainability. They have a sustainability section on their website, and they literally give you the printable blueprints, and some of them are hundreds of pages long and take time to dissect, but there are synopses as well, and you can get a real understanding of how a huge company can do this.
I mean, our industry does an environmental benchmarking survey, and it's the same idea, is that they see all their competitors who are the same size, same revenue as they are, investing a lot more in sustainability than they are. And so it gets to be a brand competition and a brand reputation issue, is that, well, if all of our competitors are doing it, it's not just the Levi's and the Reformations in the world doing this, it's our competitors, our direct competitors doing this, then that carries a lot of weight as well.
But what it does come down to is measuring profit in three different ways, not just by the money, but also have you reduced those toxins by 10%, and can you show that? So that's that whole triple bottom line is, and that's what they really detail in the Kering report, is how to show profit in different ways and tell the story, because the customers care about it. Maybe you care that you're economically profitable, but everyone else wants to see other ways you're measuring. So it does come down to measuring social and environmental factors and showing your wins there too.
I mean, part of the cultural change, though, is making people comfortable with that conversation. We're working with almost 400 brands, and only half of them let us mention their name publicly or show their logo. So half of the industry is still very much like trying things, but it's behind the scenes. We're not talking about it. It's internal only. And so I think part of the cultural change is making people comfortable sharing their baby steps, comfortable sharing what's working for them, their benchmarking. It's not going to be 100% overnight, but giving them the tools and the language to talk about it in a way that fits their brand, that fits what they're comfortable with, I think is a big first step.
You make a great point.
10%?
I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
10% to reduce waste by 10% is hard. So people who say 0% waste, that's really not possible. So, but if you can get to next year, reducing it 10%, that's a win, you know? That's, it's just, we have to realize it's a small step.
Small. So Stephanie started to talk about making that cultural change. And the industry for eons has been very private about information. And that really has only started to change maybe in the last 2 decades, where people were sharing information across different platforms. But it still exists, and it's still a part of the culture. You know, they're afraid that if someone finds out that I'm giving you scraps, but sorry, that didn't come out right. But if I'm doing that here, and in this maybe one department, what's the rest of the company doing? What if they find out about something else? And it's a snowball effect. I was involved with Social Accountability International years ago doing a research project on factories in New York City. And I had to go in and look at their CSR practices. They wouldn't even let me in the door. And these were people who were funding, I won't mention the names, these were people who were funding the grant. They said, oh, we'll bring the factory managers to meet you in the office. I said, well, you know, what the hell good is that going to do me? You know? So it is, there's a lot here. There's the culture and breaking down. And what I'm hearing is that we need champions. We need champions in every little aspect of the industry being able to talk about this, from the associates who's just first hired to mid-level to senior level to CEO suite, to be able to start these conversations. So we have another question here. We're going to move on. We sort of touched a little bit on this as well. Underlying that sustainability can be only successful if tackled holistically across every part of the supply chain. Yes, no. Andrea, I know you were saying little bits here, little bits there. What are the thoughts on that one? Anybody can take it.
I think as a small company, I feel like you can only do it in certain parts to start. It just isn't something you can do from beginning to end. I think from my standpoint, as focusing on raw materials, cotton is a big raw material for me, so sort of looking at the Better Cotton Initiative and thinking about who are these sustainable cotton farmers who are the right people to buy cotton from is really the most important thing at this point. I subcontract space in factories in New York. It's not possible for me to control what they're doing in there. It just, at my size, it just simply is not possible for me. So, but that doesn't mean I give up on it completely. I just tackle it in the places where I can tackle it, because that still makes an impact.
And in terms of holistically across every part of the supply chain, I agree we have to, and what we work on with our students at LIM College is to be systems thinkers when you think about the supply chain and understand the connections that are so unique. And when you break one part, when you do pull away from that factory because they aren't making changes towards better social initiatives and better environmental management, that in doing so, all of the people that work for that factory are going to be out of work, right? So that's what a systems thinker thinks, and they use place-based thinking as well in terms of, do we really want to do that, and how can we support this factory, which often involves teaming up with other brands that are their customers, which is unique and that we never used to do, but to help them to get to where they need to be so that we don't pull out of that factory. And I think that because of that, we do need to look at it holistically and look at our impacts in the communities where all of our stakeholders are.
I mean, our supply chains are obviously complicated now. They're not the way my great-grandfather did things in 1896. There's obviously hundreds of steps across the globe, metric tons of water, chemical, crops, oil used in the process. That being said, I think in the future, the power of technology in order to holistically connect all those dots in the supply chain. We're just at the beginning with blockchain and other tools that I think soon in the future, everything is going to be connected because everything is going to be transparent and on the blockchain. So to those brands and retailers who may be quiet about things right now, in the future, you're not going to have that option anymore, whether it's because of this technology or now all the recent changes in the laws, and we're already seeing it. We have an initiative here in New York City to make New York City circular, and there will be a white paper coming out soon and a lot of transparency and changes in the laws around that, and I think that's when people are going to really wake up.
But again, you focus, at least to start, on somewhere where you feel you have a reason to jump into it. So it could be chemicals, in fact. Chemicals are a very important part with sustainability, using green chemicals or trying to eliminate certain chemicals altogether from your product. There's a reason behind that for a lot of companies. There's regulation, either in the United States, in certain states in the United States, or if they're selling in Europe or Japan or elsewhere.
California.
So, yeah, California with Prop 65. And, there's a whole story there, but that's another 3-day conference. But so that's where you start. You start with where there's a hook within your company, where you can convince people that there's a reason to do this. We already have to do stuff on chemicals. Why don't we go a step further? And then it might be, well, let's look at wastewater and the chemicals in our wastewater. Maybe we should start dealing with that and reduce our wastewater. And then they can jump to one thing after that.
And one of the things, too, we're talking about a lot of processes, a lot of companies that have physical plants. There's also the service side of it. What are we doing from the service side to create a holistic social accountability and also sustainability processes? I know at LAM, Andrea's our lead corporate social responsibility and sustainability, really. And we joined the New York City Carbon Challenge. And I just told her before, I've got a pile of stuff up under my desk because they took away all of our garbage cans.
No more single-use trash cans.
Right. So now you have to get up and walk out into the hall, put them in the recycling bin. Very nice color-coded. Great job, Andrea. Thank you very much. Everybody's getting more exercise. But it's small things like that. And something you take for granted, a garbage can under your desk for how many years? A lot, so good there. All right, so let's see. Again, we're touching upon some of these, but a little more definition would be great. Defining the vision and setting small achievements. Nate, you're talking about that. Give us an example. What would be, in your area, what would be a small example that you could walk out of here today and implement tomorrow?
Well, some of the things that Gino Loggia is doing, of course, where it's already basically off the shelf. You can just go in and say, okay, we can implement this technology. We have to convince a laundry facility to do it or whatever, but you can use that. National Resources Defense Council has the Clean by Design program, that where they go into a factory and you can actually have them, they'll give you a person for like 3 months to go in and do a detailed analysis of what can be saved in a certain factory or a certain set of factories, and give you a whole roadmap, what can be done immediately, what can be done with 6 months, what can be done in a year. Those are the types of things you do right away.
In our case, I would say that I don't know if there are many designers here, but in our case, what we've discovered over the years is that the choice of the right fabric saves a lot of time, money, efforts, and waste. So today, the technologies, again, let you, from just one type of a fabric, get many options and finishings, okay? We're talking about, I can think of, on top of my mind, of a case where a brand had around 200 fabric references, and just by thinking carefully and choosing the right fabrics, they cut down to 20 references. That again has economic implications, but when we talk about sustainable systems, we can do that by thinking on how to design our collections.
And the beauty of some of the solutions that are up here talking today is that they come with, along with using their technology or their tools, the actual ROI calculators. Like we have built into our platform in real time, we'll tell you the water, the toxins, the energy, and the dollars saved by making these choices and buying and selling on a platform instead of purchasing new. And you can translate into that into amount of time and money and speed to market that is, taken advantage of by making these choices. And that's something you can then show to bosses and C-suites and investors. And I think that kind of reporting, and I know Jessica Fassrat does an incredible job sharing powerful, detailed reports about what she's done as well. So you don't even have to do any of the work. We deliver it to you with the solution.
Yeah, I think starting small is great. A lot of the brands that we work with, they start just because their women's team is interested in it, but then as soon as they're recycling, it spreads very quickly to other departments, their fabric team, even their facilities gets excited about it. I think we provide a lot of data and statistics, which is really valuable, but even the feedback we're getting, which isn't something we can measure, but internally can be measured, is there's great employee engagement around this. Because while people are trying very hard to be sustainable in their personal lives, it means a lot to work at a company that's also trying to make those same changes and do something positive as well. And so I've heard from the companies that we work with that there's been a lot of employee engagement around using fab scrap, and then as much as they like the service, that stuff disappears from the office. The report that we provide is very company specific, how much we picked up, what's reused, what's recycled, what's landfilled, and why, but we take the step to convert it to CO2 savings. So really, it's the service and the information, but there's an internal component too on that ROI that I think is really important.
Shipping out in the boxes that your goods get shipped in instead of buying new boxes is a small step you could take tomorrow and you can measure. Changing in terms of starting to virtually approve your color lab dips, which is kind of what Stephanie was talking about, those little swatches before, and kind of being okay with it if it's 5% off and whatnot is another way that you can really save.
I agree. I think it's the swatches. It actually had not occurred to me at all until I heard it at this panel, to be quite honest. Like, I get hundreds of them and then just throw them out because, I don't pay for them. And maybe the right thing to do is that we should be paying for them. I know.
Another
I
customer.
apologize. I feel quite bad about it, actually, right about now. But perhaps designers should have to pay for these. Or perhaps it should be that you put down a credit card and then you return them at the end. But there needs to be a process, because if you are just handed hundreds of them, you go through them and you pick out the 5 that you like, and then you kind of, throw out the rest. So that's a change I'll personally be making after this.
There you go.
Awesome.
I'm just want to add something up to this. I'm trying to connect the dots right now because I hear many good stuff. But then we are always talking about the supply chain, but the system is wider than that. We have to also consider another stakeholder, who is the consumer. Okay, in my opinion, and this is something that I heard a long time ago, is that does not have it doesn't have an impact what is not manufactured. Okay, so as us, we are not many designers, but we are all consumers. So before buying anything, let's think about whether we need it or we don't need it. Okay, I think and there's an entire thought here that we have to reconsider when we walk out of the store, because at the end of the day, if we want to be sustainable, we cannot be producing madly like we are doing now. Okay, so that would be a big change, I think, just by walking that door and going to whatever big department store and not just buying what we don't need.
Well, and a lot of consumers, it's confusing. There's so much information out there and so many certifications, and it's sometimes hard to make those judgment calls. But now, brands and retailers are having fun with the storytelling. So you can go check the QR code or type in, your number and see the entire story of that product and decide if it's right for you. Or you can go to an app like Good On You and read about the brand and see if they're embodying good practices. Or if you're a little more technical, you can go to the Higg Index and type in the fibers that you see on the label and rank how good or bad they are. So you can have fun with it as well as educate yourself and then make, to your point, that purchasing decision that's right for you.
Stephanie, you raise a really good point here. What impact does or can it have social media on this whole conversation?
lot.
Well, I see a lot of smiling faces, but I don't hear anything.
I mean, that's where your brand reputation stands, is nowadays on social media, especially with millennials and Generation Z, or whatever the next generation is called now. And those are your future buyers or your current buyers. And so you have to respond to them. But they're also your current or future employees. And so that gets back to why you do these things internally, because somebody wants to work for you if they feel like you're doing that. So if somebody's talking about you on social media and that you're doing XYZ good thing, that somebody else might hear that and say, hey, maybe I'd be okay with working for them, even though they're not the Eileen Fishers of the world. I'd still be willing to work for them because they're doing these interesting ideas and trying new things.
I don't know if you remember, Michael, when talking about all the storytelling and social media, when our students looked up different brands, what they were doing on their websites and on social media for good, and then kind of went into the stores to talk about it with the employees. And no one at any of the stores, which shall remain nameless today, but there are 5 big ones, knew anything in any store of what was. So it's not trickling down. And I'm not saying it's eco-washing and greenwashing, but nobody on the floor who deals with customers knew these things. So our brands not saying it because they're afraid to be claimed that way. But I just feel, even if it's small, tell the story truthfully, because otherwise, in this storytelling, it becomes a story being told, and it's not always true. And that is what has happened at, as I said, big retailers.
Amira?
I think it's been surprising to me, millennials are definitely more on top of in a sense, more on top of the sustainability conversation, right? This is more relevant to them. They're going to live on the planet longer, technically, so, it means more to them. Having said that, they're also the biggest consumers of fast fashion. So how do you make that connection? How do we educate them enough that they're able to understand the impact? And it's not just about not using that single-use plastic water bottle, but it actually is the clothes that they're buying every Saturday to wear Saturday night and then throwing out. Like, how do we do that? I guess that's in my mind. Not that I have a solution, but that's sort of the question in my mind.
I have a solution. You can cut up their credit cards. Steph, you wanted to add to that one?
I guess to that point, I mean, fast fashion is definitely a part of the problem, but I am a big proponent that they also are a huge part of the solution. And so we love working with the hot messes, quote unquote, because if you can change just one tiny % of the way they do things, it has a massive impact. And of course, a lot of people in the sustainability movement, you think back, for better or worse, to the H&M story, right? And 4.3 billion burned in 2018, and it was news all over. But they are also some of the leaders in the Global Change Awards and supporting businesses and putting millions of dollars into sustainability efforts. And their eco-conscious collection had millennials talking about it, even though they were still buying at H&M. So I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad thing. There are obviously pros and cons to anything, but obviously figuring out how to engage them and everybody in this conversation in a fun way while still making things that people want to buy and can afford to buy is important.
Yeah, I completely agree with this, Stephanie. In fact, they're like, to me, these big chains are like big screens where, whatever they say or do is followed sort of like in a religion. So just by changing the message, so what we were saying about just these big chains and distribution companies shifting their storytelling, they could do a lot of good. They could do a lot of good because their impact is amazing. So, but it's gonna come. I think that's gonna happen because what you are saying is it's becoming an urgency, and it will be even worse in very short time. So this is gonna happen.
I think the cautionary part of social media, though, is that with all the transparency and how easy it is to share information, when something goes wrong, everyone knows, and they know now. And cancel culture means that, like, okay, I'm going to unsubscribe from Equinox today. So I think that creates a lot of caution in the industry, and I think it creates some distrust of brands, and that's where I think there could be more leverage of educating influencers. you know, the outfit of the day. I think like maybe we don't just wear an outfit one day, and like we change the way that the conversation happens between friends and between influencers and between individuals, because I think that's where more people are looking for style inspiration now.
That Instagram thing, you know, I can't wear my suit tomorrow. So it's the same one. I changed my tie though, so is it the industry that is going to drive this, or is it the consumer?
Probably the government.
Which one?
I hope all of them. Yeah, the one who needs more money, that'll be the one. So, yeah.
I think it's going to be the industry. I have hope for this industry that I love so much. I think that people want to change, and they will change as long as you make those changes and educate everyone, from your stock person through every factory worker, so everyone is telling that same story. But I think we have the opportunity to educate our customers, and I think that policy will change once they realize we're all doing it anyway. And generally, personal and political, that's the slowest to change, and communities change faster. And we're a community, we can do it.
Coming from a city government background, I'm going to disagree. I do think policy has a really big part in this conversation. I was in the New York City Department of Sanitation when we banned electronic waste curbside, and that completely changed the way that brands sell in New York State. It changed the way that we dispose of electronics. It changed the way that electronics were made. I think something similar, if we were to have extended producer responsibility around clothing or around textiles, is going to push more change and more quickly if it's created in a way where there are consequences or rewards that mean something to all of the players and to consumers. But I do think policy has a really big part in this.
Okay.
And not only from the taxation or the rewarding systems, but also from the educational part of it. So I believe that it will come. I am a believer that, you know, no one does anything if they are not set to do so.
Yeah, I think.
Unfortunately, yeah, because there are many dreamers like us.
Yeah.
That's the beginning. But then to make it an impact, you need the system to support you. Otherwise, it will not happen.
And it's come up. I'm not sure if this panel or another one, that there's not really a regulating org or certification orgs outside of just like, this is our personal stamp of approval. But once a government requires certain certifications, those certifications mean a lot more. And they're starting to be benchmarked against something real that has either positive or negative effects. And so it also changes the way that we're going to evaluate all of these claims and evaluate all of the changes when there's a certification that's backed by something a little bit more substantial.
Just wanted to say that government's not always right. Look at California Proposition 65 as a perfect example. But, and there are all the threats on microfibers, which is a big deal for the synthetic clothing industry, the threats in Connecticut, here in New York, in California, to try and regulate microfibers coming out of the industry with very little scientific backing for it, and no proof that how they were trying to regulate would work in reducing it in any way whatsoever. And so the industry needs to be heavily involved and have ideas so that when the regulations come, they can be part of the discussion and be at the table, so that the regulations are not something that's going to completely not work for the industry.
I totally agree. And then when the government goes into everybody's home and reclaims their microfiber couches, we'll be in trouble. So about this time, I'd like to open up the floor for questions for our panelists. And I think we have a mic running around there. Mark's got the mic? Oh, we got two. Okay, great. We have one question up here and one in the aisle. I believe that gentleman first had his hand up. Go right ahead.
Hi, Wayne Brodsky, PDI Fashion. I'm also on the board of SaveOurGreenPlanet.org. You brought up a very interesting point that you have no wastebasket, and all your recyclables and all your garbage is being put in containers for the buildings and the maintenance staff to recycle for you. So much of that, you have the best of intentions,
Yes, we
but
know.
so much of it winds up in a dumpster, because the people that are implementing it don't do what they're supposed to do. I believe that it's up to the individual to take action and watch for inaction or problems that are there, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but it's up to each and every one of us to be more sustainable and greener.
Great point. Andrea, you want to field that one?
I agree, 100%. Bravo, I said up here.
But I will say there are some exciting new technologies coming out. There are bins that actually, in real time, understand what the laws are in that region and will sort the products for you. There are also new apps where if you don't know what to do with a product for the consumer, it tells you where the local bin is and what to do with it. So there's also some fun, cool new ways where, yes, the onus is on you, but you can also make it interactive, more automated, and support you in those decisions.
But may I also say why, so you understand why we've removed individual trash cans from classrooms, offices, and desks. Because you go into a faculty suite, for instance, and there's 3 offices, about 15 desks, with in each cubby is a little wastebasket. Now there's 1 recycling station. So all of those bags we can measure in terms of purchasing, right? And all those bags need resources. They're all done by petroleum, they've all used water, they've all used energy, and we're cutting those. We're also making sure that we're using better signs and requirement with the Department of Sanitation, of course. So, but we can measure success in that, and it's not just about getting people up, it's just that if you throw it in your 1 trash can under your desk, you're putting maybe a soda can with trash from your lunch, where they should be separated. New York is a
Just
single
small
source.
steps.
I agree, and the fact that we're all here is major strides to addressing the situation and moving forward to make our planet healthier and better.
Thank you. Next question.
So when I was about 13 years old,
Last week.
I'm 37. It was back when I had been sewing my whole life, and I started to teach myself pattern making and started making all my own clothes as a teenager. And it was right at the same time as the sweatshop thing with Kathy Lee, and so I really felt this, conviction, like I have to make things on my own, because I don't want some poor person in a sweatshop making these clothes. Anyways, so I made all my own clothes as a teenager, but then I also raided my mom's closet from stuff she had bought in the 70s and early 80s. And I wore one of her t-shirts that I think she got 70s or 80s from when I was 13 until long after I graduated from Parsons, which was in 2004. And that t-shirt was always soft, it never shredded, none of the seams fell apart. It was in almost perfect shape until I actually finally got rid of it, but I only really got rid of it because I think my mom said, "You still have that shirt of mine?" And I wish that I had kept it. But I look back on I've lived in New York for 19 years, I don't have a single piece of clothing that I bought in the last 19 years ago that I can still wear that's lasted that long. And I'm in the couture business, like that's something that's important to me. This t-shirt that my mom bought was not a couture t-shirt. It wasn't the most expensive t-shirt she could have bought at the time. It would have just been something regular from a department store. But these days, you go into a regular department store, whether it's a low cost or medium cost, and you feel the t-shirt in the store and it feels so soft and nice. You wear it once and you're like, "Oh, I love this t-shirt, it feels so good." You wash it once and then it feels like sandpaper.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk about sustainability, we need to talk about longevity for the products that we're actually creating. And with all the technology and advancement that we have in fabrics and fibers, how are we not making fabrics and fibers that still feel that good 20 or 25 years after they're made?
Planned obsolescence. Less stitches per inch, surged seams, all of these things make it that garments have no longevity.
Well, I have you beat. I have a Lee jean jacket in my closet at home that was purchased in 1968. Oh, Okay, you win. Next question, please.
Fascinating discussion. I think the sustainability question is a bigger question, and we talk here in the lens of apparel, but have you guys kind of gone beyond that? And oil and gas industry or even metal and mining, they face some of the same challenges. So I just want to hear from panel perspective, have you collaborated across other places where they are tackling this issue? And if so, we'll provide some perspective on that.
I believe, yeah, cross-industry applications of this and models in these kinds of conversations are critical. I mean, for our group that we convened in New York City to make New York City circular, it wasn't just fashion and textiles at the table. It was other kinds of raw materials and other industries that have a big presence here. And for my business model, one of the things we are identifying is for each industry, what are the biggest touch points of waste? And how can we build a marketplace to monetize waste? And who would use that waste? And so those kind of cross-industry conversations are absolutely where this needs to go. Even with just dealing with fashion and textiles right now, we have sold our textiles to automotive, to computer electronics. They use fabrics too. So there are those kinds of opportunities out there, and I think that is how we solve this global problem. It needs global industries.
I think in a lot of ways, sustainability in apparel and textiles is following or very similar to how the organic food movement came about and food waste included in that, and sort of rethinking where our animals are raised, where our food is planted, and how far it travels, and how long it's stored, and how it's processed. That had a very big consumer component because what we put in our bodies, we're starting to see a direct relationship to health. I think the way that relates to fashion is it's what we put on our bodies and on our skin, and we're seeing the same negative effects in our water and through chemicals and through the landfills. And so I think if we're going to look to another industry that has sort of done this from a very effective consumer participation aspect, I think the organic food movement is one of the models that we could look to.
It is, and just like you hear a lot about plant-based diets for the food market, you should start thinking about plant-based fashion. Really what we need to stop is extracting fossil fuels, oil and gas and coal from the ground, right? So every time we extract oil, petroleum the number is polyester. So if you want to use a synthetic fiber, it should really be a recycled one, except for spandex, because we're not there yet. But if you're using raw polyesters and synthetic fabrics, then you are extracting fossil fuels. So really, you have to start thinking about, in my opinion, to lower the 415 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere as of today, is to really think of plant-based materials for your line.
To add to the gentleman's conversation too, there's a lot going on in textiles, and there's a lot of crossover into other industries. There's a lot of venture capital going into some of these new startups in spider silk, citrus pulp, seaweed, corn husks. There's a lot of people doing research and trying to bring these products to market. Like anything though, they're expensive. So it's it's not cost effective yet for anybody beyond couture almost, but it is starting to happen. And I think you'll see more industries, engineering, technology, some of the chemical companies, they're looking down the road saying, maybe their model isn't sustainable. What can we do differently? And they're going to be starting to partner more than we think right now.
Right up here, I think the most exciting is that you can create, without water treatments on jeans, right? So in a world where we're running out of resources, this is an innovation that allows us to look like they're dyed with water or blasted with sand or whatnot. So I agree, technology is happening, and it is awesome.
Yeah, and it's also driving other industries, as you were mentioning before. I mean, chemical companies before saw us as a threat and a danger. Today, they collaborate with us to deliver more intelligent chemicals that at the end of the day will be necessary, but applied on the garment, not just dumping them out in a river or whatever, or in the sea. So yes, that's going to happen, and hopefully soon.
So why don't we, one more question. One time for one, we have 47 seconds. Go ahead. No, all right, go right ahead.
Thanks. One thing I find in this conversation that's not necessarily always overlooked but not talked about a lot is how much the factories and vendors are already doing in this arena and how that isn't fully being leveraged. And that's something that you can encourage your staff at all levels to engage with the factories and ask them what they're doing for other customers, because they're often doing so much more than we give them credit for. And a lot of that's not proprietary. Like I worked at Levi's for a long time, so they want everyone to use the waterless techniques, and they want the factories and the laundries to be repeating that education so that it's used for all of their customers. And I just find that people don't talk about that enough. And there's that's low-hanging fruit, baby steps, easily accessible to everyone. An assistant production manager can ask their factories what they're doing. Or maybe a customer is getting these great recycled fabrics from a mill they haven't heard of, and they can start working with them. Like, I think there's just so much out there that doesn't cost anyone anything, and that really anyone can start to be engaged in the conversation.
Well, that is a great starting point. So everyone in this room needs to be engaged or further engaged or more engaged. How about a round of applause for our panelists?